Alright, so I wanted to make a follow-up video to my beginner's guide for the astro-curious, because it gets a lot of random hits, and I don't get a lot of random hits from other videos. So, we will do this again. I kind of really breezed past the houses last time. We talked very specifically just about how we were looking at the energy rising to the horizon, this is the eastern horizon, culminating at the midheaven, and then setting down to the western horizon, where we take energy back in, and then coming down to the IC, which is the lowest part in the chart. We kind of left it at that. We didn't get too deep. But the houses all have their own independent significations, which are extremely important interpretive principles for all forms of astrology. As this is a theoretical division of the sky into 12 equal parts, different house systems use different interpretations of that. Some are time-based, some divided equally via space on the ecliptic, some divided equally on space via the celestial equator. Whole sign houses take just each sign as a house on its own. What we're using here is Placidus, which interprets an even division of time. This is the system I use most frequently, so we're going to stick with it for this video, but they're all good. They all work. You learn a system and you stick with it, and the skies will open up for you. But for this video, we're going to just look at the houses as an interpretive principle, and we might get a little complicated with it. We'll see where we go. But we need to keep in mind that the concept is absolutely every element of life fits into one of the 12 houses. There's a signification for it. And while they weren't all written explicitly about, if you understand the philosophy behind these houses, you can start to see how absolutely everything is going to fit into one of these houses. So we'll just do a quick little analysis of the houses first. So the first house, which begins with the eastern horizon and the 2 hours or 30 degrees or however you want to conceive it, before things rise above the eastern horizon, wherever you are, is your identity. This is the house that relates to your physical health, your body, who you are, and especially your personality. So in any type of interpretive principle, if we want to look at just who you are and what's going on with you, the ascendant is the most important part of the chart. Next up we have the second house. The second house is your personal belongings. It's your money. It can also be your values, your self-esteem, but it's anything you own. If we go to the third house, we're talking about elementary school in a way. We're talking about arithmetic, writing, grammar, basic skills in life. But it's also right next to the IC. Now, when we get to the fourth house, we're talking about your home, the deepest part of your ancestry, and where you live. So the third house is what's right next to the fourth house. It's your siblings. It's your aunts and uncles. It's your neighbors. It's also your neighborhood. It's also short trips around your town. These are important interpretive principles for the third house. The fourth house, the IC, we can see as your mother. Some systems will put father here, so this is a complicating thing, but we're going to stick with mother, okay? This is what I tend to use. We're going to stick with mother. So the IC is your ancestry. It's your deep motivation that you get coming into the family you came into. The fourth is your home, and it's your home within your home, which is your bedroom, and it's your home within your bedroom, which is your bed. It's also how you sleep. The fourth house is this deep, most private part of your chart. It's the innermost part of your chart. It's the darkest part of your chart. We move from the fourth house into the fifth house. We're moving up towards the horizon, but we're also on the setting side, remember, which is relating to other people. What's below the horizon is inner, relating to other people. Above the horizon is outer. So the fifth house is romance. The fifth house is sex. The fifth house is creativity. The fifth house is children, the results of sex. And as it's your children and creativity, it's also anything you create. Anything you would call your baby, a great project of yours, is going to be your fifth house. Okay, it's leisure, it's gambling, it's a good time. The fifth house is a good time. Unlike the sixth house, which is illness and accidents, but it's also duty. In antiquity, it was considered representing your slaves. Grabs the collar. These days, it might represent your employees if you own a business, but it also represents your duty towards your work. And it's self improvement as well. It's a difficult house, but it's also your pets. You can put your pets here. So, someone who's really into animals is going to have a loaded sixth house. All right. Next up, we get above the horizon on the western descendant. And this is the seventh house. This house most prominently represents your partner, your marriage partner especially. It could be a business partner. It could be any old other person. Because the western descendant is how you take energy back in. And it represents the people who are going to be in your life. So most prominently, marriage partner. But it can represent just about anyone else. The eighth house, now, as you see, the seventh is opposing the first, your personal identity and other people you relate to. All of these houses have opposite meanings from the house opposing them. They're related and yet somehow opposite. The eighth house is the second house from the seventh, so it winds up being the possessions of other people. So one of the more prominent ways this comes out is it becomes inheritance. If someone dies, you can look to the eighth house to see what might happen there in terms of inheritance. But it's also the house of death. So here you see these two significations coming together. It's the house of death because where these systems were made was a desert. And so being outside when the sun was here, which would be about 2 to 4 p.m., if you didn't have water or shade, you could die. This is the eighth house here. Some systems give sex to the eighth house, and I think that there's some relationship there, but you have to look at it as not sex as a romantic and fun tryst, but sex as a function of a relationship. So it's the duty of sex in a married couple and the routines and the element of sex becoming a ritual and something ingrained as part of a deep relationship. We move from the eighth into the ninth house, which is opposed the third. And so instead of elementary school, now we're in university, essentially. This is any learned profession. Astrology actually goes to the ninth house. But it's also religion. And it's also long distance travel. And I think all those things go together because often to get deep specialized knowledge, one must travel. It's not going to come out of your hometown. And it also has the implications of the religious pilgrimage right here in the ninth house. Now moving on from the higher education, we get to the 10th house of career and status, opposed to the 4th house of home. As we gave mother to the 4th, we'll give father to the 10th. The 10th house is also government. It's also the king. It's royalty. It's status. It's the peak of someone's purpose in life. When we move from the 10th to the 11th can be seen as the second from the 10th. It can be the results of a career, which can implicate a social group of shared interests. This is the 11th house. Groups, friends. In modern times, we also give social media to the 11th house. And also, as the 10th can be the king or the government, the 11th can be gifts from the king or government. Or it can be the results of hard labor, the status of that labor, the reputation of that labor. And I believe that it's these reasons that luck wound up being given to the 11th house, which is a bit of a... I think it's more a function of the 11th being the result of hard work rather than pure unearned luck. Which brings us to the 12th house, opposite the 6th. So again, instead of... The 6th tends to be more like physical illness. The 12th often can be mental illness. It's viewed as the house of self-undoing. It's where we sabotage ourselves. It's where we imprison ourselves. Prison and any sort of restriction on freedom is given to the 12th. We often would give drug addiction to the 12th. How fitting we got Neptune there. But it's also the house of seclusion. It's the house which describes how we need to be alone sometimes and how we need to take care of our own mental health on our own. So now I've given just a very, very quick rundown to the 12 houses. As I said, absolutely everything in life fits into one of these houses, so there's no way to ever have a comprehensive or complete list of what all these houses mean. You have to understand them on a philosophical level to be able to place what you need to look at in a chart into the proper house. Now that we've laid a tiny bit of framework around this, we're going to just look at this theoretical person's natal chart and just see what the houses say to us real quickly. We'll see where it gets us. So this person's ascendant, their identity is in Sagittarius. So the first thing we're going to look at is, oh, there's nothing in the house. Well, okay. Some people, you'll find some pop astrology that'll be, oh, nothing in the first house. That means there's nothing going on there. Yeah, this person has no identity. Come on, give me a break. At any rate, forgetting about weather, I don't find it to be a very important interpretive message that nothing is in the first house. The most important message is looking at the ruler of the cusp. So if we look at the ruler of the ascendant, we're going to see it's Jupiter in Gemini. Now, if we look at Jupiter as someone's ability, their wisdom to understand things in the long term, and this beneficent element of equality that Jupiter likes to bring, the fact that it's in detriment doesn't mean this person doesn't have wisdom or philosophy. But when we look at the significations of the houses, you have to take the condition of the planet into account. This becomes important. So this person's Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini. So their identity, their ascendant, what they put out into the world, is going to be inhibited in some way. Now, when I think of the significations of Jupiter in Gemini in the 5th house, what immediately comes to mind is that this person is a class clown. This person is inclined to make light of everything and not take things seriously, and probably offend people with what they say quite a bit. They're making probably crude jokes, and they don't always come off that well. That's how I view this. Just very basic interpretive principle. Mind you, Jupiter is trining the moon here, so this sort of implies with this trine aspect of ease that maybe they're able to not take it so seriously when people don't respect them, but then again, maybe they're able to be light about it, but then again, the moon is conjunct Pluto, so probably they're not able to be light about anything. And we also have a sextile down here, but we'll save some of this for later. So next we'll go to the 2nd house. 2nd house again is empty, but the 2nd house cusp is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is in Leo. Saturn is in its detriment. Again, we have a house ruler in detriment. So first off, the first thing you're going to think about here is that, oh, this person probably has a hard time with money. And Saturn is involved in this heavy T-square. Again, let's sort of walk away from it for now until we've done a more basic interpretation of the houses, and we'll come back to that. But with Saturn, everything comes slowly with Saturn. You can't really harness it until you get your Saturn return at around age 29. So what seems really obvious to me, if I was interpreting this chart, is that they would have really struggled with money earlier in life. And potentially, if they dealt with Saturn properly and internalized those energies and built something of quality in their 30s, that they could have a comfortable life later. But because it's in Leo, for sure, the beginning of their life, the money was a struggle. Next, we come to the 3rd house. It's in Pisces. It's ruled by Jupiter again. We've already talked about Jupiter and where that's at. And this, again, because the 3rd house is elementary school, we've got this signification, and it's starting to build a story here, that this Jupiter in Gemini in the 5th, ruling the ascendant and ruling the 3rd house, really implies this was a class clown who didn't succeed in school because they were just trying to make people laugh and not being taken seriously, and that then harmed their 2nd house of money. It's pretty clear, but here's a basic conclusion we can come to with this hypothetical human being. Now, within the 3rd house, we also have a Mars-Venus conjunction. And Mars, in its sign of Aries, is very powerful. Venus, on the other hand, is in its detriment in Aries. Well, this is interesting. There's an implication here that this person, again, with the 3rd house being how they express themselves, is probably expressing themselves a little too bodily, a little too impulsively, we'll say, too impulsively. But we're going to get deeper into it as we go around the chart. Now, the fourth house, we have the south lunar node here, and I could interpret that as someone who's bored at home, but we're going to not talk about the nodes too much. We're going to kind of move past that. But their fourth house is ruled by Aries, this powerful, dignified Mars. Okay. So if the fourth house is the mother, right off the bat, we're going to say, okay, this person had a strong mother. You know, they were a goof, but their mother was running the show. And let's just jump ahead a little bit, because I can't help it. I see this conjunction. I see Mars ruling Venus and bullying Venus. And it's like, okay, so then that means that the 10th house is the father. Oh, so the father is ruled by a Venus in its detriment in Aries, ruled by this powerful, commandeering mother. Well, it sure seems like we had an emasculated father and a powerful mother, and a lot of these conflicts came out as the class clown. All right. So in the fourth house, we have a Mercury-Sun conjunction. Very tight. Okay, so again, we're seeing more and more power to this fourth house, to this mother. So their home being ruled by Aries, there's probably a lot of fighting. The mother was probably yelling a lot. You know, this forceful Mercury with the power of the sun behind it. You know, it's in Taurus, but you know, if this mother didn't get her way, you'd hear about it. You know, and probably it was like this home had to be really neat and ordered, and everyone had to follow her prescription on the home and such. So we'll move to the fifth house. The fifth house here, ruled by Venus in Taurus. And we've got Venus in detriment in Aries conjunct Mars. So this is a Venus that's too forceful. It's a Venus that's going to push too hard to get what it wants. And we already know we got Jupiter in Gemini in the fifth house. So this person's desires in life, what they like, what their leisure, is going to be too forceful and turn other people off. As we already talked about with this ascendant. We're building up this story here about this person who is the class clown, and you know that'll get you a certain amount of cred, but this person was a bit crude. They were absolutely crude, and a lot of people saw them as unsavory. And so to me, this is the story of the fifth house. Their leisure and desires were off-putting to other people. Next, we have the sixth house ruled by Mercury. So when it comes to illness and injury, we have a retrograde Mercury that's combust the sun. These are all significations of a Mercury not doing so hot. So this person probably, in being a goof, maybe doing silly things, hurt themselves a lot, prone to accidents maybe. Yeah, it's not the best layout for the sixth house. Now when we get to the seventh house, who's this person's partnership going to be? How do they relate to other people? Well, we're looking at the same signification we just looked at, although Jupiter is conjunct this sixth house cusp, so maybe there's a bit more luck to their illness and injury than their partnerships, which is in the fourth house here. So you can see this person having problems with a controlling mother, carrying that on over into their own relationships with this Mercury combust retrograde, going back to the past. Chiron's there too, if you want to use Chiron, this deep wound this person has. I wouldn't assume that they're going to have an easy time with relationships. This will be a challenge. No less, it's exactly opposite Uranus, so there's going to be something shocking about the people they choose, and they're going to probably fight with them a lot. It's not a great setup here. Okay, moving along to the eighth house. The eighth house of shared resources, trust issues, death, all these things. So the eighth house is ruled by the sun, and this person's sun is in Taurus in the fourth house. And this is all tied into this T-square with Saturn and with Uranus. So given Mercury's involved, and we already know Mercury rules the descendant of the partner, and Uranus is going to be shocking decisions, and Saturn is going to restrict and restrain all of this stuff, and make it all seem very binding, it seems obvious to me this person will wind up choosing partners that they have to fight with and that are always trying to control them, and they're still stuck fighting their mother, and so they're fighting their partner as though it's their mother, and not working together in this eighth house to build trust and to build a satisfactory, settled life. This is a problem this person is going to have to deal with. So in an astrological reading, when I look at this T-square and look at the house setup, this would have been one of the main issues I would want to talk to this person about, and try and dig into their mother and how they can get past these childhood issues and view their partner as a separate human being that they have to deal with on that person's terms. And in general, you could also go to the level of, given all these issues with the mother, and also this like difficult. So we didn't even talk about this, but Jupiter here rules the third house. Jupiter in detriment. So, and then you have Mars and a Venus in detriment in the third house. Probably there was conflicts with the siblings as well. And I'm going to assume with this person, probably the siblings were preferred over this class clown person. So it could be that Saturn in the 8th signifies that when the mother dies, they're going to be cut out of the will, or they're going to get dissed in the will somehow, and this is going to become a whole other complex they have to deal with. Now, when we get to the 9th house, we already know this person had a difficult time in school. So if we look at higher learning, it's going to be ruled by Mercury, and Mercury's combust and retrograde. Again, we know Mercury's not in a great place. And this person has the moon conjunct Pluto. Pluto and the moon are not a nice thing to put together. This is a very paranoid, anxiety-ridden inner world. So given the rest of the story we've already told, I'm going to assume this person didn't go to university, didn't learn anything higher, and then they beat themselves up about it. They feel guilty about the fact that they didn't build anything with their life. If I knew what their religious background was, I might dig into how they relate to that background via the 9th house cusp and this setup. But we'll leave it at that for now, because we have kind of like a very cohesive narrative going on, and that would probably draw us too far out of it. And we don't know, because this person never existed. And if they did, I'm so sorry. I'm being harsh on you, dude. Oh, man, I'm being harsh on you. I'm so sorry about what I'm saying about you, if you exist. 1st of May, 1977 at noon, or midnight, at midnight in Toronto. If you're out there, get in touch. Let me know how I did. But this person also, now we're going to get to their career, their 10th house, their status in the world. They've got Rahu up there. So there's this like blowing up energy, and Rahu's right on Spica, but this is too much for this. Oh man, I want to just do a full chart analysis now. I'm going too far. But yeah, it's on Spica. And this person really wants to build a career. They want success, even though they joked and they didn't take their elementary school seriously. Later in life, they're going to want to do something important. Well, where are we at here? The 10th house, as we talked about his father, or her father. I'm assuming it's a guy. I'll just go, it's a him. It's a him. It's the framework I seem to be working with. So, you become your father, right? So in his career, he's working towards a Venus in detriment career. And he's got Uranus in the 10th house too, so something shocking, something not expected. Can they pull it out? He's got that Venus-Mars conjunction opposing his moon. And the moon, being intercepted, doesn't even rule anything. So we're lacking some ability to interpret the moon, but what we can do is we can view the moon as being a co-ruler of the 7th house, because it doesn't have its own rulership. And that is logical, because anytime you get a transit to Cancer, this person is going to have that transit be entirely within their 7th house and relating to their 7th house issues. So it's logical to assume that the moon also rules their 7th house issues. So is it possible that this person's career is going to come from a partner? Or, as the 7th house can be partners in general, perhaps they start a business with someone else. And with Uranus, that kind of makes sense. They're doing something weird that's just not expected. Now, if we look to the 3rd house, it could be some type of journal. They're writing something in the 3rd house here, and it's shocking, and people don't respect it. Now, the 10th house doesn't just have to be your main income. It's not money, it's career, it's status. So it could be this person has some other job. They don't make, because this is Venus in detriment here, they probably don't make any money from their main drive in life, this career, this journal, this shocking conspiracy thing, whatever they're doing. But this is what means the most to them, is this weird writing thing they're doing. And then if we look to the 11th house, it's ruled by Mars. It's powerful. Oh, and Mars, even though Venus is in detriment here, it's still benefic, and it's still, especially because it's ruled by Mars, that means it loves Mars. It's going to help Mars. It's going to create a beautiful aura around this powerful Mars. So the 11th house of friendship, this guy absolutely secured a powerful friend group. He may ostracize a lot of people, but the people who find him funny and enjoy his sense of humor are going to be all about him. So he has this powerful resource here in the 11th house. And Mars being in the 3rd of communication, and perhaps he has this journal or something. So he's actually has fans, maybe. He's doing something that gives him fans and gives him appreciation. But what about his 12th house? Again, we have a house ruled by Jupiter in detriment in the 5th. So I think that the things that he enjoys that ostracize other people, he actually feels deeply guilty about. You see Neptune here in the 12th. I think that although he's the class clown, he's covering up things that he never really dealt with, and at night he beats himself up about it. And so there's this trap that he's in. And so I look at all these significations. I see this T-square here. I see Saturn, which represents, in this chart, it represents his first house, like we talked about with an intercepted sign, and his second house. So his identity and his money and his values and his self-esteem is trapped up in the 8th house of other people's resources. So even though he was always making fun of the world that he was in and the society at large, he still wants that respect. He still wishes that he could have got people to respect him on a deeper level. And it squares his Mercury and his Sun. And his Sun rules the 8th house. Okay, so we see very directly Saturn having this inhibiting influence on these 8th house issues. But also Mercury, which in this chart is the 7th house partner, which I don't believe he found a satisfying partner. 6th house of injury and illness. And also the 9th house of higher learning. So we see this complex here, where him rebelling against his overbearing mother did all this damage to his life, which is something he did to himself, and then he regrets it. The house of self-undoing. I mean, I wouldn't get that specific with someone in a session if they hadn't given me indications of that, but this is how I would just read a chart cold. This is what I see in this chart, and maybe I went a little bit outside of the idea of being a real beginner's video, but hopefully if you stuck through this, you can understand just this basic interpretive principle and how you can start applying it to your own chart and the charts of people around you. And that is, you look at the ruler of the house cusp, you assess it with whatever means you can, whatever level of astrology you're on. What do you know about that planet, where it is in the chart, which house it's in, which sign it's in, the aspects it's making, many other interpretive principles that are beyond the realm of this video. And then you apply that to this, and then you just keep going around and you keep looking at what you can see via all these different planets and what they mean to the houses, what they mean to the house they're in, and what they mean, because every time a planet rules a house, it is that house. Within the chart, it becomes all the significations of that house in that chart. And that's another step. Maybe we'll do a third. Maybe we'll get a bit deeper, but it's pretty good. Okay, hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed.